Welcome back to DemocraZy. I'm your co-host, Charvi.
I'm your co-host, Emma.
DemocraZy is a podcast brought to you by the League of Women Voters of Virginia Youth Council.
And we are here back for episode 6, which is called...
I Got a Text.
Can the government read it? Our lovely intro music was brought to you by Peter, our lovely logo was brought to you by Maddie, and our lovely behind-the-scenes work is led by our friend Nikki. So thank you so much to all of them.
Also, shout out to Bobby, Maisha, Sadie, and Uma for all the work that they do to support our team.
So, if you can't tell, that was a Love Island reference.
Little obsessed.
Charvi really loves Love Island, and I have yet to experience it, except for one time when I was half asleep.
I kid you not. Nikki and I went to the national convention that the league has last weekend. And literally every single time we finished the voting session on bylaws, we would go to our room and just watch Love Island and order something from Uber Eats.
Trinity and Bryce are supposed to be really cute. Kenzie is quite something and always does the splits.
She loves having two men.
Someone pronounced compromise as compromise.
That was Jen.
So those are the only... that is my sole impression of the show, other than watching the intro and about 5 minutes of episode 1.
Dude, Casey can't... This guy named Casey, he can't let go of the fact that nobody picked him on the first day where they were doing, like, this doors thing. And one of the questions was, is it okay to go through your ex's or your partner's messages? Mm-hmm. The answers were sometimes, never, always. What would you say?
I think... if you feel like you need to do it, that probably means you're insecure.
It's kind of one of those things where if someone tells you no, then you feel more inclination to do it.
I feel like it should just be like, I'm not going to give you my phone to go through it, but you can have the password and you can just do stuff on there. I don't care.
I agree. Question.
Yeah.
Do you think that the government should be able to do that? Because we all know all these conspiracy theories about how Google is recording us and sending the data to the government, or everything I ask Siri is being seen by someone else.
A lot of people are scared about a surveillance state, which brings us to...
our Civic Case of the day.
So this episode is unique because we are just both really excited about this topic, and we're just going to yap for the entire podcast.
Yeah.
Which, sorry, not sorry.
No interview today, guys.
But our big topic today is...
the Fourth Amendment.
So the Fourth Amendment says... the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause supported by oath of affirmation, particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized.
So basically, the government can't barge into your house and take whatever they want for evidence about how you killed someone, unless the courts say that they can.
Yeah, the Fourth Amendment's the one that says the government can't just come in your house for fun. So for a long time, the Fourth Amendment has only applied for physical spaces. So the government can't enter your house, they can't enter your car, they can't rip open a letter you get in the mail. But what happens when so many of our communications turn digital?
There was something that happened in 1967. There's this guy named Katz, and he's running a gambling business. And he does it over public telephone booths for some reason. That's real smart. But anyways, the government starts to suspect him of doing this, and gambling's illegal, obviously, interstate. And they start bugging the telephone booths that he's apparently using. And they use those bugged telephone booths to record his conversations, to use that as evidence of, he's committing a crime, we're going to send this to court. They were doing all this without a warrant, by the way, because the idea that had been standing for so long, the precedent from a previous case, was that these kinds of digital spaces, these public spaces, they're available for anybody to go to.
Yeah, because if you're looking at just the text of the Fourth Amendment, which I know I said really quickly just kind of as a joke earlier, but it says houses, persons, papers, and effects, which are all physical things. And so Katz kind of raised the question of what happens when you're on the phone with someone, emailing someone, or using other means of digital communications.
So what the court ruled in Katz was that the government actually could not go and get that information from the booths without a warrant. Why? Because Katz had a reasonable expectation of privacy within that telephone booth. So even though it was a public space, he could expect for his private calls with people to be something concealed from the government. And that is what invalidated having a warrant. You needed to have permission to go and access someone's private communications.
Yeah, and that's really a rare Supreme Court W. But honestly, the most important thing to take out of Katz is just that from then on, the government could not search anything that both the individual, me, and society at large, so everyone who lives in my area, thinks should be private without a warrant.
So basically, public things are something that you can access without a warrant. Private things are searched under the Fourth Amendment. 3 years later, Katz was applied in a really weird way. Or not in a weird way, but to a really
It was a weird way. It was a weird way.
It was a weird case. The facts of the case are really weird.
Yeah.
So basically, there's this department store in Minnesota. And there's this guy who runs that department store. He's like the security head or something. He thinks that gay men are going into the department store bathroom and getting really freaky.
Oh,
So
weird thing to think.
He goes to the police and they station themselves at the ventilators where you can peer into the bathroom stalls and see what's happening.
Okay, hold on. Getting freaky in a department store is one thing. Trying to find people getting freaky at a department store is a whole other thing.
Like, why are they trying to watch that? They're trying to watch that? They were trying to watch what was happening in those stalls, and the defendant in this case, Bryant, he's like, this is hella weird. Why are people watching me when I'm allegedly pissing? So... So then the court actually uses the language of Katz again, and they're saying that the Minnesotan judge, they say that Katz can be applied because it doesn't just extend to digital communications. It's kind of this reverse situation where it can also be applied to a facility that you would expect to be private. Kind of think of how cameras can't be installed in public bathrooms now.
I mean,
it's that idea.
You would think that people wouldn't put cameras in public bathrooms because that's just weird. But after all of that case law that we just talked about, what we can take out of it is that the government needs a warrant with probable cause to search anything that is deemed private. And that warrant needs to be very narrowly tailored. So you can't say, I'm going to search every house on this block. You can just say, I'm going to search this house for this thing. But new technology makes things a little bit more complicated.
For example, let's say Nikki had a really bad day and she's like, I'm going to go murder Charvi.
It would take more than a bad day for that, but okay.
Maybe. We got a little bit close when we were sitting together for 72 hours at convention. Anyways, though, let's say that Nikki wants to kill me for some reason. I don't know why, but she kills me. And the police think that she's done something. They're like, we have probable cause to go and investigate Nikki. The firearm is in her house. It's pretty easy to get a warrant for that because it's in a physical space. But when it comes to something more on the digital space, evidence on the digital space, that's where things get really muddy with any of this case law.
Yeah, so that is the type of modern issue we run into. The police know the gun is in the house in her situation, so they get a warrant for Nikki's gun in Nikki's house that caused Charvi's murder. But what happens if she wrote down the murder plan in a notes app in her phone? What if that's the only evidence that she actually committed the crime that could get her convicted? It suddenly becomes really difficult to get a warrant for a digital space because you might not know what app it's in on the phone. You might not know that it's on her phone instead of her computer. So how do you get a narrowly tailored warrant for that kind of situation? All they know is that they suspect Nikki of the crime and they know that she left a digital trail of evidence.
Yeah, online the Fourth Amendment gets really muddy. I think in general, digital law and applying the Constitution to technology, it's so weird because also technology in the way that we have it now and the digital sphere, internet, it's also new. Because if you think about it, it's only 2026 and a lot of this started roughly 2000s. So it's just tough.
Yeah, and obviously, you know, the framers of the Constitution knew that there was going to be some sort of change, but they could have never predicted in their wildest imaginations that we were going to be carrying around every private piece of information about ourselves in our pockets 24/7.
No, literally. So Katz clearly kind of outlines what private information looks like, and because that's what's protected from the government and has to be warranted for searching. So what exactly is public information in the current day?
So public information, if we're just looking at physical spaces, is anything that's in the public view. So we're at my house right now. If I walk down my driveway and look out into my neighborhood, that's clearly public because anyone who drove down the road could see what was happening. But there's another category of technology-related information that the government can access without a warrant. which is third-party information.
This is going to be a little bit complicated, so bear with us.
So let's say I have information about myself. You know, let's say I'm playing Senior Assassin and I planned to go shoot my friend with a water gun at the mall at this time. I'm trying to keep that information really private because I don't want anyone else to find out. But once I tell Charvi, the third party in this situation, that information is public. It can go anywhere. It doesn't matter that I want it to be private because I've told another person, so it just isn't anymore.
Good thing I don't gossip, but some of these companies do.
So that's exactly what the court said in the case Smith v. Maryland. You need to think about it like this. If you have a letter, and I'm sending a letter to Charvi, and it has her address on it, and there's content inside the envelope about the fact that I'm going to get my friend out of Senior Assassin, anyone can see that I'm sending that information to Charvi, but not everyone can see the information that I put inside that envelope. So that's exactly what happened in the Smith v. Maryland case. It was about whether the government can access which phone numbers an individual dialed without a warrant. So in that situation, the phone numbers that are being tracked don't actually divulge any information about what was said on the phone, just that that contact was made, which is why in the Smith case, it was okay for the government to do that.
And in some cases that might be enough, because let's say you're contacting... What's an example?
A known murderer.
Yeah, let's say you're contacting, like...
Nikki.
Emma calls Nikki, and that's enough evidence somehow that Emma was involved in my murder. You know what I mean? Like, It makes these kinds of situations really weird.
Yeah. The problem is, it doesn't just have to do now with who I'm calling. The Smith v. Maryland ruling did more than that, and it just kicked off a whole era of third-party doctrine that can be based on actual content given to third parties, not just which third party is being contacted.
Which, by the way, keep in mind that Smith v. Maryland was ruled in like 1976 or something. I don't know the exact year, but it's a pretty old case. And it's been used and applied to a lot of digital stuff that didn't even exist back when it was ruled on. So hypothetically, if Google is recording my conversations to give me better ads, and I start talking about trying to get a fake ID, can the police ask Google to give them that recording if they've seen me enter a bar illegally and they're trying to, see did I commit a crime or not?
Yes, they can, because the problem with third-party doctrine, which is what this whole web of legal concepts is called, is that it rests upon the idea that an individual assumes the risk that their information is being shared when they share that information with anyone, even a company like Google that passively collects your information for things like ads. So another example is a private Instagram account. You might say that you think your Instagram account should be private if you have the private setting on, but when you make your Instagram account, you're also agreeing to all of these terms and conditions between yourself and Meta or Instagram as a company.
How many times have you actually read any of the terms and conditions or policies when you're signing up for TikTok or Instagram?
And so that turns into a danger when other companies that you're using are collecting your information potentially without your knowledge and have the capacity to share it with the government.
And some of that really became an issue in 2018. I mean, if we're using this case from the 1970s, of course it's going to come up again. This happened in a case called Carpenter v. U.S. So this guy named Carpenter, for some reason he wanted to go and rob places like Radio Shack and T-Mobile. And the FBI suspects him, and they try to contact Carpenter's mobile service, which is T-Mobile in this case. They're like, hey, can we get the cell site location information from Carpenter? That's basically how, how we have cell phone towers when you're driving. I used to think those were the Eiffel Tower, by the way. I would eat carrots.
That's
and
so
I would eat carrots, see a cell phone tower, and be like, that's the Eiffel Tower.
Aw, baby.
Anyways, I digress. So, you know how we have cell phone towers? Your phone basically pings the cell phone tower every 30-ish minutes, and that gives your approximate location because that's how you get the data, and it has to register your phone in the system. The FBI, they tried to get that information from T-Mobile to see where Carpenter had been. Had he been around Radio Shack? Had he been around T-Mobile's locations? They found that he had been.
Yeah, and this data is called metadata. And the important thing about metadata is, like Charvi said, your phone is constantly pinging off these towers and creating it. So if I drive to get coffee, like we did earlier today, the government knows that I went to get coffee because my cell phone pinged off the nearest cell phone tower every half an hour.
Carpenter's like, y'all can't be getting this information without a warrant, okay? So he gets it appealed all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the court actually rules that despite the fact this is public information and he's voluntarily using his cell phone to connect with that cell phone tower, Carpenter still has a reasonable expectation of privacy because cell phone tower usage is constant. You can't be giving your location to the government all the time. That is an intrusion according to this ruling.
So the way Carpenter weakened third-party doctrine isn't actually as expansive as some people might think. Carpenter said that it was much too private of information, which seems kind of counterintuitive because he was driving around in public. But the whole idea was that when you have all of his location information for everything that he's doing, you'll know when he's going to his doctor appointments, when he's going to see his family, when he's going to vote. And so when you compile all of that data together, it does become harmful and a privacy violation.
That creates the issue of having a surveillance state, and that's why it's really important that the court actually ruled against this. Is that another Supreme Court W?
It is another Supreme Court W. Because think about how often you tag your location on your Instagram stories, look at your Snap Map, or even use Google Maps to get around. All of that is kind of the same genre of location information that was at hand in the Carpenter case.
Yeah, and actually because of this, my dad always turns off location services whenever he's not driving around, which is really tedious to be honest, but
it's probably
that's
good.
It's just to speak to how prevalent these technologies are and how these concerns, like, they actually do factor into our lives. I mean, I use my GPS all the time to get around.
Well, because even if the government isn't saying blah, 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 where was Emma Lindsay at 5:02 p.m. on Thursday, it is really easy for them to get that data if they did want to. And as if all these other complications weren't enough, when you realize that Carpenter is really difficult to apply, to look at new cases about internet data like this is just to say, okay, is it like similar enough to Carpenter to have the same ruling, or is it like kind of different?
Kind of to bring things together, we have this reasonable expectation of privacy. Third-party doctrine made it so that even if you would technically expect privacy when you're sending a DM or when you're having your location tracked, then it's, vulnerable to being searched without a warrant. But then Carpenter v. U.S. brought back some of that protection that was established in Katz, so that applies to the digital space. These issues really hit close to home. In the southern states, something that's really been happening a lot is, how sometimes people use AI chatbots, they're like, I need to get an abortion. Those kinds of communications with AI chat boxes, some southern governments are trying to access those, which creates this whole other issue of, again, what communications can be accessed. AI really complicates those things and will continue to as technology evolves.
And to bring it really close to home for us, there was actually a case that was ruled on by the Supreme Court just a few days ago called Charvi v. U.S. And that case actually originated in Midlothian.
Midlothian is really close to our
If you're
school.
watching from not a Central Virginia area, it's really, really close to Richmond, which is where we are. And so it hits really close to home for us. And what happened in that case was there was a guy that tried to rob a credit union. And the government, like local police, FBI, etc., go to Google and they're like, hey Google, we are using a geofence warrant, which I'll explain in a minute, and we want you to give us all this information about where this guy went. So just as a little explanation, a geofence warrant is essentially, if you're Google, Charvi, and I am Emma the police. Emma the police is saying to Charvi, hey, this is the geographic circle, geofence, that the crime was committed within. And here's the time-ish that it was committed. Can you give me all of the data of every phone that passed through that geofence in that period of time?
And Charvi, aka Google, goes, absolutely.
And so the problem here is that obviously it can be helpful in getting the suspect for a crime, but it's also giving the government the data of thousands of completely innocent people.
Exactly.
And really just exposing data in a way that I think could be damaging if it goes too far.
There's something that works kind of similarly that some governments have been doing, where they take a couple of key words, like, for example, we keep going back to this murder example, but let's say someone looked up as a keyword, how to dispose a body. Okay, I don't know. That's a really long keyword, but you get the point. There's
body disposable. Body
Body bags?
Yeah, body bags. That's a good one.
Okay. Let's say someone looks up body bags, and the government wants to know everybody who looked up body bags within a certain set of days because they know a crime was committed during that time. Every single person who for some reason was looking up a body bag, maybe it was a typo, they're going to be flagged. And it's the same way of how a bunch of innocent people get their data collected, and it really, again, is creating this issue of a surveillance state.
But the big thing we want you to take away in this episode is that it is becoming significantly easier for the government to obtain very detailed pictures of our life without actually conducting what is a Fourth Amendment search. You know, people have Ring doorbells, the government buys flock cameras and uses them, and there are just so many things being sent to and from people on the internet all the time. You know, if I go to Panera and I'm on the Panera Wi-Fi, I leave a trail of my computer, Emma Lindsay's computer, being at Panera, and the government can go to that Wi-Fi company and say, hey, why was she there at that time?
Yeah. Or breadcrumbs, because Panera sells baguette.
That was funny.
So the big question at the end of all of this is, should we expect that if we're stepping outside of our houses, anything that we do in public can be searched without a warrant?
I think that it is a little bit of an overstatement to say every single thing that you do when you're not in your house is searchable by the government, easily accessible, etc. But I think you're not far off, at least if the court does not continue to cut back on third-party doctrine. So I think even more than just assuming that the government's always watching you and being paranoid, it's about being mindful about where you put personal information about yourself on the internet, whether you keep location permissions on like your dad does. And just knowing that nothing you do is necessarily 100% private unless you are, you know, in your home alone, not using a third-party company.
So we were at National Convention, and the League actually adopted a position on surveillance very recently. So we would encourage you guys to go and explore that on their website. I'm sure that they have an update by now, hopefully. And also, by the way, August 4th, primaries for midterms. You guys should keep that on your calendar. We are going to start posting a lot more about that since it's July now as of recording this. Oh, crazy. I'm going to be a senior soon. Anyways.
I'm going to be a freshman soon.
That's so weird.
I know.
Anyways, keep August 4th on your calendar. You can also check out Vote 411, which is an initiative by the League of Women Voters to help you be informed about all the different elections and all the different ways to register according to your state. They've got a really cool interactive map. Emma and I might be doing a little bit of work on that later. Find our episodes on YouTube, Spotify, and then on Instagram and TikTok you can find all of our little reels and whatever not-nots.
Yeah, so especially in the future, because there have been so many Supreme Court cases coming out recently, we're going to talk a little bit more about those. And just because this episode was just Charvi and I talking for fun about a topic that we really enjoy, our community shout out is going to be the League of Women Voters of the U.S., which is the organization that is, you know,
it's our mothership.
The mother of all of the state leagues that ran National Convention that Charvi and Nikki got to go to.
Thank you guys for tuning in. We will be back with a 7th episode very soon. Bye.